I must say that you start with the student activism, you move to unionism. I was also in the union activities, and then I went to politics. But the politics is the regional level of the regional council. For 6 years, I was not really defeated at the ballot box, but I decided to quit and study law. Then I was a legal practitioner for very few years, and then I joined, became as a civil servant. As a civil servant, I was just really in the field of law as a human rights lawyer in the Ministry of Justice. That's actually where I got opportunity to be further trained in human rights by the UN agencies, AU, particularly the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Commonwealth Secretariat, maybe you have heard about them, and then SADC. I served on several statutory bodies, including the Disciplinary Committee for Legal Practitioners. I served there for 4 years. If you read in the court papers, you find my name there because these lawyers, they don't take a job, they take you to court when you want to favor their bread. So all the way to the Supreme Court, there was one lawyer who took us all the way to the Supreme Court because we actually found him guilty of dishonorable conduct, and we recommended that he should be scrapped from being a lawyer. So he didn't take it lightly, so he took us all the way to the court. So my name is in court papers. And then I also served as a Labour Advisory Council for 3 years. The Labour Advisory Council. Labour issues is very serious in this country. As you know that even the government is not so sure as how to handle labour issues here. First of all, there was a law before which was regulating labour issues, and then they realized that, oh, this is just too much. We are not managing, and then they scrapped that law, then they brought in a new law. So labour issues is still not really where we want it to be. I got the experience there and there. So, and then internationally, I was also for 3 years a member of the Human Rights Council, Namibian team, because Namibia is a member of the UN, and there is a body of the UN Human Rights Council that actually reviews countries on the human rights issues. So, the first time when we went, when Namibia was a member of the Human Rights Council, I was part of that team, and I can claim that I lived in Europe for so long, because almost 3 years I had to, I mean, every 3 times a year I have to spend my time in Europe. Sometimes they even gave me a diplomatic passport because of this particular issue. So actually, I had worked closely with the office that I'm occupying now. So in the end, I'm now the Ombudsman of Namibia. So it's like I'm shifting chairs. I was on the other side of the table, and now I'm on the other side of the table, because the other side, I was actually defending the position. I had to monitor. I said, no, you are not. We're not really doing well as it's supposed to be. So, Ombudsman's work is not really a job like being a legal officer. It is actually a constitutional office where someone has to serve the nation, someone has to serve Namibia. So you cannot really take it that I became an ombudsman because I wanted to get a job. I didn't really think about that one. I wanted to get there and save Namibia. So this is why I take it seriously that I will just perform my work in terms of the Constitution without fear and favor. That's what the Constitution says. Today, I was asked to speak about the Ombudsman's mandate vis-à-vis social justice. But before I get to that subject matter, I would want you to understand that what is the Constitution actually, which created the Office of the Ombudsman. We all know that the Constitution normally emanates from situations where nations were in conflict or they come from a struggle. And then they come together and say, this is officially the way this country or this nation has to be governed. This is basically why you see other countries don't have a written constitution. Example, because those countries does not come from conflict situations. For example, Britain don't have a written constitution. And Israel also the same. They don't have a written constitution. But Namibia have a written constitution because we come from a situation where we didn't really enjoy certain rights, even though these rights were already articulated in the UN document long before. So a constitution now, in particular, that this one of Namibia, its main function for now, for purposes of our gathering, is it regulates or distributes various powers from various organs of states. And it also restricts those powers with how those institutions must use those powers. For many of you who have read the Constitution, you know that it has 21 chapters and 148 articles. Now, there is always 3 traditional branches of government. And this is the executive, legislature, and the judiciary. And if you look at the Namibian Constitution, the executive is in chapter 5 and 6, and the legislature is in chapter 7 and 8. The judiciary is in chapter 9. Interestingly enough, the Ombudsman is chapter 9. So it's not later down the line. It's chapter 10, you know. So it's just there, the top 10. So it's a very important constitutional office. Now, the mandate, briefly, is in Article 91 of the Constitution. It really talks about 3 issues. Maladministration, human rights, and the protection of environment. And we all know what that means, but if you want details, I can welcome the questions as we move forward. Now, interestingly enough is that the Ombudsman, when you Article 78, that actually talks about the independence of the judiciary. And then you read Article 89 that talks about the independence of the Ombudsman's work. Word by word, comma by comma, is exactly the same. Identical. So, unfortunately, the 2 institutions, the other one they have the inherent jurisdiction to deal with matters like the High Court and the Supreme Court. They deal with all matters in Namibia. But the Ombudsman don't have inherent jurisdiction to deal with all matters. So it's actually stipulated in the Constitution. But only those issues that I mentioned. And by the way, when I do my work as an ombudsman, it's supposed to be actually the last resort. You have to use your constitutional rights as citizens to complain through other channels. For example, if it is maladministration, if it is from the Ministry of Home Affairs, you have to go and complain to the Ministry of Home Affairs because you have put those people in office. So only when they totally not resolving your issues according to your liking, and they have now told you that this is final, don't come to this office again, we will call the police. That's the time you're supposed to go to the office. I'm the last resort, because with me they can't ignore me. I can also go to court, take them to court. So that's actually, in a nutshell, the Ombudsman's position. But we will go into details when you ask questions. Now, social justice. Just for your information, this is, before I get to the definition and the other things of social justice, the UN has actually declared International Day on Social Justice. It was declared in 2008 that it should be celebrated on the 20th of February every year, globally. And that is actually to measure the people's living conditions. Because back then, the UN declared that member states of the UN, they must actually reduce poverty by 2030, or even eradicate the extreme poverty. Because, as you know, UN measure poverty that those people who are living on $1.25 per day, they are more poor. And that was actually the idea behind it. Now, if we come to the definition of what is social justice, when I checked on our favorite library these days, and encyclopedia, the internet, I really found a lot there. So there's not one meaning of definition of social justice, but I found the following. I will take you through academic aspect now, because so for you to understand the aspect of social justice. I found many answers. Different political philosophers and liberals, such as John Rawls, Jeremy Bentham, and Robert Nozick, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, and Chinua Achebe. They speak on the social justice in many formats. And I will get to the points now in a moment, but I will take you through to what they are saying. Indicators. He says, we realize when things go wrong or bad, but not when things are right or good. We can define war, but not peace. Similarly, we can define injustice, but not justice. John Rawls has done a remarkable job while addressing the concept of social justice in his book, and I think for your interest, you must write the name of the book, A Theory of Justice. In his book, he said, he defined the concept of justice as fairness. Simple. When you read this book, you will see that the theory of justice is based on liberty, equality, inequality. He said that policymakers should pursue a scheme for furtherance of liberty, equality, and inequality. If you underline that sentence, I will come to that sentence at the end. Policy makers should pursue a scheme for furtherance of liberty, equality, and inequality, where such equality will benefit the least advantaged. Sorry. He argues that social and economic inequality should be arranged so that they are both the greatest benefit to the least advantaged. Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill stated in their book, The Philosophy of Utilitarianism, that an action is right if it tends to promote happiness or pleasure, and wrong if it tends to produce unhappiness or pain, not just for the performer of the action, but also for everyone else affected by it. In other words, utilitarianism is a class of consequentialism. The general doctrine in ethics and actions should be evaluated on the basis of their consequences. Now, you understand that some of you have read this philosopher. Graham Bentham is actually an economist. But he's not telling us about this thing of, no, economy doesn't work like that. It's not about fairness, you know. He's putting it to you that it has to do about, he said that the good of the society is the sum of happiness of individuals have in the society. The purpose of morality is to promote the good, happiness of society. A moral principle is ideal, and only if it is complies, maximizes universal happiness. That's Jeremy Bentham. He says that we should always act to maximize total net balance of pleasure or happiness. That's the principle of utility. It's the moral idea. That's Jeremy Bentham. Where is his fellow philosopher, Robert Norwich, on the other hand, talks about entitlement theory of justice and distributive justice. He says that the state primarily is known as a night watchman. This is interesting. He says, which means that the state had to discharge a minimum function to the society. These were to maintain law and order, to take action against violence, to fight the foreign aggressors, to stop theft and fraud, to implement all sorts of social contracts in order to establish its existence and credibility of the state. It had to do all these functions if it wants to be legitimate, to legitimatize itself as a state. Now, Chinua Achebe is a distinguished Nigerian social writer, for some of you who have read his books, stated that an enforcement of justice. That's a very interesting sentence. Enforcement of justice. Whether couched in unwritten custom or tradition by which private peoples organize their lives on a standardized penal code of civilized culture. Laws and their enforcement are expedited for a meaningful interrelationship, social order, peaceful and coexistence, and economic growth. very important center of any society. Now, my definition of social justice, after I have taken you through these philosophers, is that all liberals, which is, but not limited in the order of importance. I can summarize it for you. Social justice is really access to education, universal health care, child welfare, right to housing, income inequality, social inequality, women's rights, fairness, dignity, and of course other civil and political rights that I call individual rights. Again, you can ask a question as what did we learn from those political philosophers I quoted, and particularly those which I was emphasizing. It tells us mainly two things, in my view. That social justice is not possible without strong and coherent redistributive policies conceived and implemented by government. Secondly, social justice is about states amazing the ever-increasing power in order to do good things for the citizens. That's basically what we are saying. Ladies and gentlemen, I think social justice is really a common good. The total social conditions which allow people, either as a group or as an individual, to reach their potential when given the opportunity. That's basically what we are saying. Now I will take you now to come to the conclusion with the discussions of social justice and then the work of the Ombudsman for you to get to what I mean. The mandate of the Ombudsman related to social justice is actually to answer maybe another question. We have to ask another question first. What are the main principles of social justice? What are the main principles of social justice? There are many, of course, but I will highlight 5 main important ones. That's actually our issues on a daily basis. Access to resources. We all know what access to resources is, what it means. Equity. Participation. Diversity and human rights. I'll take you through a little bit just to give you a picture what I mean. But of course, access to resources, everybody knows what's access to resources. If it is done fairly, it will definitely reduce poverty and even eradicate extreme poverty. Equity is not in the economic term, as you may know that. English word, sometimes you can use it for other subject matter. But in this case, it is referring to equity of fairness or impartiality in distribution of tools to individuals for their needs and socio-economic status in order to move towards similar outcomes as other people. Participation refers to how everyone in society is given a voice and an opportunity to verbalize their opinion and concerns. Do they have a role to play in any decision making that affects their livelihood and standard of living? That is the participation I'm talking about. Diversity refers to appreciating the diverse culture. So are we appreciating that one? To recognize that some people faces more economic barriers in society than others, particularly if I single out the San. I actually grew up with San people. There are many in my area where I come from. For example, the discrimination in employment on the basis of factors such as race, gender, disability, ethnicity, sex, age, and other characteristics.
are constant issues in our society. Human rights refers to the basic fundamental rights and freedoms that belongs to every person anywhere in the world from birth until death. Now, here, chapter 3 is very interesting. Chapter 3 it starts with Article 5 and it ends with Article 25. In that column is the one that we Namibians says it cannot be touched, it cannot be amended. You can only amend it when you add the good things to it. But interestingly enough, this is why I highlighted it. It highlights three economic, social and economic rights in that chapter. The rights that we always say that you cannot enforce it. But it is in article, in chapter 3. I will tell you what are those very important ones is in there also. Education is one. The culture one, the one I talked about is there. And then the right of property. If you read the Constitution carefully, it says every Namibian is supposed to have a right, not supposed to, has a right, we use the word has a right to acquire and alienate property, both movable and immovable. So we are talking about houses, housing issue here. It is in chapter 3, but look where many of our people are. And then you say we cannot enforce it. What is it doing in chapter 3 then? So let me conclude. Therefore, human rights and social justice are certainly interrelated, and it is impossible for one to exist without the other. And this is where the Ombudsman's mandate becomes relevant on the subject that you have asked me to talk about tonight. Now, how do I do my work as an ombudsman? It's actually, I already alluded to it, but in detail, it's obviously it's of investigatory in nature, and then I produce a report. Now, many people will argue that the reporting aspect is actually where it doesn't really give too much teeth to the ombudsman. It's not actually entirely correct, because that's actually where the power is. I told you what the Constitution does. It regulates the powers. Who must have what powers and where your powers end. Now, as an ombudsman, I'm actually a proxy of the lawmakers, a representative of the lawmakers, particularly National Assembly. It's stated in the Act that I must report to the Speaker of the National Assembly about my activities of the year. Every year I write a report. Now the question is, why to the National Assembly? Because you must understand the three traditional branches of government. They have checks and balances. Parliament or National Assembly is actually responsible to check on the executive about the performance, the policies, whether they are implementing the policies and the laws. So when I submit my report, I highlight those issues of maladministration, incompetence, violation of human rights, and environmental issues. Because this is actually the duty of the executive to correct these things. Because they were voted into power. They were given the country on their behalf. Now, when I give that report to the National Assembly is supposed to take the minister to task and say, okay, it looks like your ministry is actually sleeping there. It's not executing its function, constitutional mandate. So that's basically where you, as a voter, must appreciate the office of the Ombudsman. That I will take that complaint, that cry that comes from you, further to the right people, which are parliamentarians, then you have elected the parliamentarians for that matter. So you're supposed actually to point the finger at them that you have all the information about what's happening on the ground, but you are sitting on it. We know it. I can even pick it up and show it to you, and then you pick the Ombudsman's report. This is it. You went to Parliament. What did you do with it? So that's actually a powerful procedure. Now, as a social, as a chief human rights defender and an advocate of social justice, I am of the view that elected representatives should hold social justice as a core in their dealings, in their conduct, in their business, in their official capacities, about who they are and why they were elected into public office. And they should develop their own theories of social justice while in public office. It is, of course, completely legitimate to prioritize different things, be it utilitarianism or distributive theory, because you cannot just go to the office for 5 years and you have no position as how you should actually address the social challenges of your citizens who have put you in power. I have smelled some of your questions. I anticipated some of your questions. You will now ask me, are we failing to address social justice in this country? I probably don't have the exact answer, but what I know is that the challenge we still have BC thinkers and AC thinkers in this country who are occupying public offices. Now, when I talk about BC and AC, it's not a biblical term. It's not biblical terms. I'm referring to those who think before the Constitution was actually written, and the others who are thinking like after the Constitution was drafted. And I will give you an example of those people. The media is very active in this country, and they are actually saying these nations to some extent. They have an issue with the executive engaging in business where this business you can only get involved with it if you have correct information from the executive. And they said, no, there's no law that prohibits that. A law, read Article 42 of the Namibian Constitution. It has 2 paragraphs. Very interesting. If someone has a constitution here, I can read it for you. There are 2 words there. Let me read it. Let me read it. And by no means I'm not really interpreting the Constitution, but I'm just telling you that the BC thinkers is the problem. The AC thinkers, they are better off, because when they read this, then they say, maybe we shouldn't go that way. Article 42 says, during the tenure of office as a member of cabinet, ministers may not take up any other paid employment. That one is fine, but there is a comma there. With their position as ministers, comma, or expose themselves to any situations which carries with it the risk of a conflict developing between their interests as ministers and their private interests. So, I'm not so sure when you read the English word whether if you are engaged in a business where government is also if the information that you are using is coming from cabinet. I'll get to that point because the second one is very interesting. It says, no member of cabinet shall use their position as such or use information entrusted to them confidentially as such members of the cabinet, directly or indirectly, to enrich themselves. Now, this information is confidential only to cabinet. But they go there and get themselves into fishing quotas. Fishing quotas is who decide how many quotas must we give this year. It was the cabinet. So it is not inconsistent with. So I'm not so sure, but I mean, you Namibians, you are all lawyers. And others will blame colonialism. That's why we are not getting there. And maybe capitalism, you also blame capitalism. Maybe you're right, but I know that there is no perfect system in the world. Other countries have the same economic system, capitalism, and they are better off day by day. What matters most is safety nets, and it is not. It's not really the economic system. In the end, it is about thinking. Thinking is actually the departure point. Everything in this world is about the thought. It started with the thought, except the earth and the heaven. That one is from the Almighty. But everything you see here, the roads, the dams, the aeroplanes, the cars that we travel with today, it started with a thought. And I'm not so sure whether we are really thinking when we are drinking coffee at home. My favorite story here is when we were young people. We used to talk about stories of the weekend. You're talking about how we were really drinking, and today is different. In the corridor of our leaders, when they drink coffee, they talk about the struggle. It's good, but it is documented. Why do you want to talk about it? Inclusive growth is very important. That's why you need policies that strongly support subsidizing the poor. On this point, I was at one point as chairman of the school board of one of the Hindu schools here. And I think I was probably the first black chairperson of that school board for a very long time, maybe. And I didn't know the dynamics inside there. When I went in there, I wanted to push the issue of, because that school, the parents, they pay because they want their kids to go to a good school. And I wanted to push the agenda that they must subsidize the poor kids at other schools. But unfortunately, 6 months later, down the line, I was elected as the Ombudsman, so I had to resign because otherwise it's a conflict of interest. The parents will come to complain to me. So I don't know what is going to happen there now. But yeah, that school is really getting good school fees, what we call it, school development fund. But this is the idea that I have, that those schools that are actually managing to collect development funds, they must actually subsidize poor schools also in terms of books. And maybe also repeal those policies that are barriers in the impediment to social policies, the economic distribution of resources. If there is any, I serve also on the statutory body, which is the Law Development Commission. This body has embarked on this project also of looking into the laws that are actually hampering or hindering the development in terms of land distribution in urban areas. But it is 30 years that's the time that we are realizing that maybe we must look into that. All this time we were just maybe thinking that everything is going well. Yeah, obviously, to end up, I must mention this one that we are. The other problem is we are more of a market-driven nation of people, which means that I got this. This is mine. I got a nice house, so that's it. I don't care about others. That attitude is not African. Normally in Africa we share, and I think the other point is that the blame game. We blame the poor that they are lazy, they don't want to acquire property. It is what they want, you know. That culture also is in Namibia. What I'm saying is that capitalist. What I'm saying in the end is that the capital is not scared. The vision is. I can repeat that one maybe in a different sentence. The resources is not scared in this country. The vision is scared in this country. I will leave you with the quote from Mahatma Gandhi. I know many people don't like this great man because of his other dark side also. But everybody has his dark side. He says there is enough on this earth for everyone's needs, but for no one's greed. I repeat that one. There is enough on this earth for everyone's needs, but no for one's greed. Thank you very much.